what we did, or what was a big part of the beginning of the exploration, was trying to overlay all the information that is there. Then also so I kind of went through all the stuff that was done before. So I got hold of a file which had all the Roger things in it. And then I overlaid what Suhasini kind of sneakily proposed in her development plan and how to do roads. Then the 2007 plan of Anupama, how she treats the industrial zone, the lines of force, and how she has her tweaks on the inner areas. Then Fabian's proposal was a big input. And I tried to kind of make sense of it. And so what my main takeaways in the beginning analysis were that, okay, one thing would be to try, on the one hand, to go without the outer ring as much as possible, especially in these parts and up here where the outer ring would cut through the forest quite a lot. And then also that Kotakara is just a no-go zone, and also having the outer ring just parallel to the village road is kind of a little silly. And so then what came also from several sources already is the need for the bypass here at Ida and Shavadi. And so then the next thought was, okay, what are actually the connections? And especially, okay, a big wish for the Crown was to have it as much shared space or as least traffic as possible, and at least in the residential zone. So to really one aim of this, actually, yeah, it's a little cleaner. So one aim was then to at least get this stretch as a pedestrian zone. So then I tried to kind of, okay, one thing is the idea that the existing inner road, which is Parambokaland and might well exist up into the future, that this is one bypass anyway. And so the other idea was then to also bring this up here when we get this bypass down here. So there's different options possible, either in front of the line of goodwill or behind. I like the idea that this gets some connection here and that the pedestrian zone gets even extended. And then over at the other side, so here a lot of presenters also kind of agree that, okay, a little bit car traffic would be permissible, but if you want to have the least possible, then you want to get the traffic away from that road. So here we also could have the outer ring activated. And then the question is, okay, how does the traffic come back here? So I took a kind of straightforward version where there's not so much damage to the forest here. So just using the existing bypass, what is in Suhasini's plan is going up here. So this could also be an option where then it cuts over here, or extending the outer ring all the way and cutting through the forest, which is maybe not necessary. So in the upper part, it's also mostly following Suhasini in the sense, okay, we don't need to demolish so many houses to get some roads here. And this is the bypass to Dakali, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I think with that bypass, it's very natural to just, okay, to say that the ring, the crown itself is for cyclists, For pedestrians, you just have nice paths through the forest. So this is what you anyway want when you have a forest, and the cars go through the bypass. So I'm not sure. I'm not even very convinced that it would need something like these high lines or whatever, which is kind of a fancy, nice thing if you really need a perfect circle. But yeah, and so generally, how the traffic comes along up here, and how much does it need to touch on the Crown Road, and also the whole question here, I think that is the first question that I would have to a traffic planner. So one next step was to kind of get an idea of what could be a good distribution of public spaces along the Crown, and so one general rule, which is also coming from these pattern languages, which were mentioned quite often, is having public spaces every 400 meters, or at least in 400 meters distance from every house in the residential zone. So, and since this is the pedestrian area, I took the liberty to put even a few more. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 at the big junctions. The most important being the historically given one in front of Solar Kitchen, and then 2 smaller ones in between, which is also then inspired by what the previous Dreamweavers had with the axis coming from the Matrimandia. And this follows along the Crown, so then in the other 3 zones, like you have 2 or 3 public spaces with 1 major public space and 1 or 2 minor. So in the international zone, 1 major, which would also connect to the public spaces inside, and 1 minor, 1 major in the middle of the industrial zone, and 1 minor here, and the next one would be then a youth center, and 1 major in front of Kalabumi, and 1 minor again on this axis. So, and I don't think that this master plan is particularly interesting as a reference. That's GMP planning a new city near Shanghai. But what I kind of took away, so when I was thinking about how does Rojiangji understand the buildings along the Crown, so he has the idea, okay, he wants to connect the inside and the outside. That's why he makes the buildings quite porous, puts them up on stilts, and there's a lot of gaps in between. And then the road becomes kind of secondary. It's just, okay, where do we put the road? Just outside? Or this is at least the feeling that I get from that. And for me, I mean, I heard a lot of people kind of resonating with the point that this road actually feels like the actual cut. Okay, maybe this is open and connects to the inside, at least symbolically to some degree. But with the road in front, it's a little difficult. Then there's the section from ATDC where there is buildings on the other side, which are not really shown here. Okay, but when I then saw this master plan where the road is really just running in front of the buildings that kind of frame the Crown or hold the circular road, the same with a road here inside along the lake. And for me, it was kind of, okay, on the one hand, you want the movement through the buildings, but actually kind of the energy of that circular movement is not really held. It kind of dissipates. And then I actually think also getting really the density from outside to the ring road is kind of also what connects outside to inside. So that sense, what you already more or less saw, what I did a little bit as an exercise was, okay, like if you really want to fill up this edge and to get like continuous building mass as much as possible and also framing the public spaces, how far do we get? And so then you have breaks where there's already existing houses and then already the centers that come either from these axes or from the intersections with the radials. And I also picked up the idea that I think Marie brought up first, like to, for example, have structures in front of the library, or maybe connecting here in front of humanscapes a little bit, to get this feeling of having the crown road held from the outside. Yeah, then it's always the question, like how much do we already take what is there in the plan by Anupama and Roger. Anyway, so the next idea, okay, here maybe one idea of how to have an actually very framed public space connecting to the public space in front of Unity Pavilion and following that axis. And one other idea was, okay, what actually gives these axes meaning? Okay, so one thing is that is already happening, that at least at two public spaces, these lines meet with the crown. And then first I thought, okay, like what makes a typical traditional plaza, like cheesiest example, Piazza San Marco. So you have one main facade, the church, and then you have some vertical element, the tower, you have the arcades, you have a clear frame, but it's not a rectangle, stuff like that. So so where these lines come from is the meditation chambers. What then the translation to, okay, this is like the individual spiritual, and this would then be the public. So you would not have another meditation chamber, but maybe along these axes you would have the public spaces. There was one pattern by Christoph Alexander, which is called public living spaces. So you have a roof, it's covered, you have furniture, maybe even fixed or loose or both. And along the major axis, they could even reverberate the geometry. So you could have a hexagon on the Solar Kitchen Plaza, then a triangle opposite to Savitri Bhavan, and the square, and the industrial zone, and the circle, and the cultural zone. And then you would have these smaller ones in between. Yeah, and then the question about the vertical elements. Okay, I'm not so deep into the topic of in how far the water towers actually still make sense in the new concepts. But I mean, there's kind of also a little bit of a tradition to kind of make some fancy water towers in Auroville. So why not having these along on the public places? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this is a little bit, okay, what is a contemporary interpretation of celebrating communal space, so Burning Man Festival. This is one proposal for the Burning Man. And this is like our close cousin, Arcosanti, public spaces. Yeah, and then also, I mean, I didn't take too much care of really getting an idea how to treat these water bodies, but one in front of the line of goodwill, and then you would have where all this water comes. So I took this more pragmatic approach. Okay, where more water is, there you would have more water bodies and some trench along the road and here, and maybe one hexagonal water body at the square. Yeah, so this is one very contemporary example of getting a vertical element on a public space. I think there's only a staircase inside, so a watchtower. And this is also a watchtower, but this is also how a water tower could look like. And this is actually the full-fledged example of it, Nye McLaughlin Architects. So where you then have all the elements, so you have a gate, you have the public building, you have the vertical element, which is now a watchtower and not a church anymore. And you have the monument, which could be the art piece today. Yeah, and this section kind of exemplifies how I think right now about the Crown Road, to really have this very, how do you say, urban facade on the outside, and everything on the inside can be this more loose pavilion style architecture. And yeah, these sections are not yet so much related to different parts on the crown, but for me this was like just collecting the first 4 examples that kind of made sense to me. So the very conventional way to do it, having 2 rows of trees, small road 6 meters in the middle, 2 pedestrian lanes, and then the whole thing inverted. You have the cycle path 4 meters in the middle and 2 times 3 on the outer, and this is what I found more interesting for the pedestrian zone, where you have a shared space and only permitted traffic, and the tree line a little bit away from the more urban facade, so that you kind of create that street room together with a tree line, and then again the pedestrian area. And this would be another version of that, where you have then articulated bus lane of just 3 meters. And so this is what we try to get a sense of. Okay, how well does it come out? So in gold we have these public spaces. Next one would be here. And so kind of the takeaway a little bit from these renderings is, okay, maybe these spaces have to be a little denser, actually, that we thought of them as a little bit too wide. Yeah, so this would be the beginning of one of the lines of force. And here's the second communal space with a framed public space, and the vertical element, lines of trees. Yeah, and just to underline this with some fact, I think this is a very nice resource, quite recent, and there they specifically say, if you want to slow down traffic, don't make the road wider than 3 meters. So that means 3 meters or 6 meters is the width that you want, or if you want to have this kind of in-between thing, 4.5 or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Henrik.